Have you ever looked at someone you cared for and noticed a bruise they tried to hide? Out on the wide prairies of red willow, silence carried secrets heavier than storms. A weary rancher, Silas Boone, hired a quiet cook, Clara Mae Dawson, thinking only of chores and survival. But when he saw the marks on her skin and the fear in her eyes, he faced a choice no man can ignore: turn away like the rest of the town, or risk everything to protect a woman who had already lost too much. What would you have done if you were in his boots? Would you keep your head low and let darkness go unchallenged? Or would you stand tall, knowing it might cost you everything? This isn't just a tale of hardship. It's about the moments when a single decision can change, not only one life, but many. It's about scars that can either bury us or bind us together. So lean in, friend. Let your heart wander back to a time when love had to fight to survive, and when courage was the only law a man could trust. If this story already stirs something in you, please like, share, and subscribe, so we can step together into the rest of this journey. She cooked to stay invisible. He ate to silence the ghosts. But when bruises bloomed where kindness should have lived, the quiet rancher could no longer turn his eyes away. The skillet hissed like a rattler's warning as Clara Mae Dawson turned from the stove. Her sleeve slipped just enough for Silas Boone to notice the faint edge of a bruise, deep and dark like rot under pale skin, peeked out before she yanked the fabric back in place. He didn't speak, not at first. He only studied her face. Clara Mae never flinched, never lifted her gaze. She set the pan aside, as though nothing had happened. "Want another helping?" she asked lightly. "Biscuits are burning," Silas muttered, though they weren't. He just needed her to look away. And she did. Outside, the Boone ranch was quiet as always. The wind slid through cottonwoods. A mule brayed somewhere in the distance. Cattle murmured low as dusk rolled over the fields. But Silas's mind refused the calm. Not this time. 6 months earlier, Clara Mae had shown up at his door. A widow or so, she claimed, looking for work. He'd needed help, and she'd needed wages. Plain, polite, steady, never late. Never asked for more than her pay in the small room tucked behind the pantry. He knew almost nothing about her. Yet that night the silence between them felt heavy, dangerous, like some hidden truth had finally stepped into the light. Silas Boone wasn't a man who pried. The last time he had, his wife and unborn child were buried before the ground thawed. Curiosity, he'd learned, could cost more than a man could pay. But when Clara Mae poured coffee into his cup and her fingers trembled, just barely brushing the rim, he saw it again, another bruise, this time on her wrist. The silence dragged too long. Clara Mae noticed. She straightened, turned as if to leave. Who did that Silas's voice cut across the kitchen like a rope pulled taut? She froze, still as stone. "I ain't blind," he added. "Softer now. And you ain't clumsy. So who put those marks on you?" The pause was longer than any sermon in Red Willow's church house. When she finally turned, her face was unreadable, not fearful, not angry, only tired. "Doesn't matter," she said flatly. "It's finished." Silas shoved his chair back, the scrape of wood against plank echoing in the kitchen. "You don't believe that," he said. "I believe it's none of your concern," she answered, folding her arms, not with defiance, but as if holding herself together. "You hired me to cook. That's all I owe you. But it wasn't all. Not anymore." He could see the threads unraveling in front of him, the flinches at sudden noise, the gloves worn when shelling peas, the way she stared into fire, like it whispered things she couldn't bear. "You got children?" he asked suddenly. She blinked, No family. None that count. Then you're alone. Her jaw tightened. Been that way most my life. Silas stepped closer. Not harsh, not tender, just close enough that she had to lift her eyes. You ain't alone here, he said quietly. Not unless you choose to be. Something cracked. Her lip trembled half a heartbeat before she steeled it again. He didn't push further. He just opened the back door and stared at the fading sky stretched across the pasture. The cows huddled in the distance. The porch lantern creaked in the wind. That night, Silas didn't sleep. He heard Clara Mae moving in the kitchen. Past midnight, the soft clink of dishes, the scratch of a chair leg. When he opened his door, a crack. He saw her at the table, scarf tied tight around her wrist, peeling a bruised apple. She wasn't crying, just staring at the flesh as it browned. Next morning, her sleeves were long again, but Silas couldn't unsee what he'd seen. Later that week, fixing the barn latch, he spotted wagon tracks, fresh, deep, not from his cart. Someone had come in the night, stopped near the pantry window, and left. He stormed inside. Clara Mae was on her knees scrubbing the floor, sleeves rolled. Who's been coming here? No answer. Don't lie to me, he said low. I saw the tracks. She froze, then whispered, barely audible. He won't stop. He never does. No matter how far I run. Silas's blood chilled. Who her hands trembled? Virgil Crowe. The name meant nothing to Silas, but the terror etched on her face did. You want me to take it to the sheriff? He asked. She shook her head violently. No law's ever helped me. He's got friends. Money buys silence. I've lived it. Silas straightened, jaw tight. Then maybe it's time someone didn't stay quiet. You don't even know me, she said. No, he replied. But I know what it's like to bury the ones you love and wonder if you could have stopped it. I'm not doing that again. That evening she placed stew in front of him, her hands steadier than before. Neither of them noticed the figure standing just beyond the tree line, watching as the sun sank low. Silas Boone leaned against the porch post, watching Clara Mae hang the wash out by the barn. The morning sun bore down hotter than it should have for that time of year, but she still tugged her sleeves low, hiding more than the heat could explain. A clothespin slipped from her fingers and rolled into the dirt. She bent to fetch it, but froze halfway. A crow let out a harsh cry above the cottonwoods, but Clara Mae wasn't watching the sky. Her eyes were fastened on the split fence line that cut toward the Red Willow Road. Silas followed her gaze. At first, he thought the horizon shimmered with heat. Then he saw him. A lone rider on a black horse moved with the kind of patience that unsettled a man. He didn't push the animal hard. He didn't need to. Fear always galloped ahead of his sort. Clara Mae turned on her heel and hurried for the house, her skirt brushing dust behind her. Silas met her at the door, jaw set. It's him, she whispered, pale as driftwood. Silas slid the shotgun from the rack by the wall and stepped outside. Don't look so big from here. He doesn't have to, Clara Mae answered softly, clutching the doorframe. Not him. The rider reached the fence line but made no effort to come closer. He didn't call out, didn't dismount. He simply sat there astride his dark horse, a wolf studying a chicken coop. After a long, heavy moment, he turned the horse and rode off slow into the tree line. Clara Mae sagged into a chair as if the weight of keeping herself upright had finally broken. Silas stood in the doorway, shotgun still in hand, that man's face etched hard in his memory. I'm going to town, he said at last. No, Clara Mae snapped, louder than she meant. Not to the sheriff. I told you he won't help. Virgil Crowe has half the county bought. Judges, deputies, even preachers. Silas turned back inside, resting the shotgun against the table leg. I'm not heading for the law, he told her. I'm going to see a man who used to ride with the Rangers. Lives out east now, one eye and a limp. But he still knows justice when he sees it. Ezra Holt doesn't bow to politics. She looked at him like she wanted to believe, but didn't dare. You'd do that for me. It ain't about doing it for you, Silas said, pulling his hat low. It's about what's right. He left before she could answer, saddled his mare, and rode east, dust rising behind him like smoke. Clara Mae watched until he disappeared beyond the ridge, a strange warmth curling in her chest. Safety. It was the first time she had felt the word belonged to her, but the ranch was uneasy in his absence. Every window seemed to hold a shadow. Every sound made her turn her head. By late afternoon, she was sorting jars in the pantry when the floorboard creaked. Her breath caught. She spun around, fists clenched, only to find Jesse Pike, the young ranch hand, shifting nervously in the doorway. He twisted his hat in his hands, cheeks still marked with the last of boyhood. "Miss Clara," he stammered, "there's a man waiting at the gate. Ask for you." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of man?" "The sort that don't blink much. Tall fella, black hat. Real polite, though. Said he had a message." Clara Mae brushed past him so fast she nearly knocked over the preserves. Jesse hurried to follow, confused and worried. At the fence, nailed to the post, was an envelope. No rider in sight, just a sheet of paper fluttering in the wind like a warning. She tore it free and opened it with shaking hands. 6 words stared back. "You're not worth dying for." "Clara?" The ink was dark, but she swore there was blood pressed into the fibers between the lines. Her throat tightened. She shoved the paper into Jesse's chest. "Get the others," she ordered. "Lock the barn. Close the chicken house. I want everyone inside before the sun drops." Back in the kitchen, she bolted every window, every door. She laid Silas's shotgun across her lap and sat in the corner, a blanket drawn over her knees, listening to each groan of the old house as if it were a scream. When Silas returned near midnight, the sound of his mare's hooves cracked against the stillness like gunfire. Clara Mae opened the door, shotgun raised, until she saw his face. "It's me," he said evenly. Lifting his hands, she lowered the barrel, her breath ragged. "You came back." "Course I did." He stepped inside, eyes sweeping every corner. "Did he show again?" "No, but he left this." She pressed the note into his hand. Silas read it twice, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his pocket. "Did you find the man?" she asked. "I did. Ezra Holt is willing. Said he needs a name, a face, and a reason. Told him he'd have all 3 come morning. But Virgil doesn't fight fair." Silas's eyes narrowed. "Neither do I." They sat across from each other in the quiet house. Clara Mae's voice trembled when she whispered, "I won't run again." "You won't have to." He reached across the table and took her hand. Not in romance. Not yet. Just in solidarity. They kept the lamps low and the doors barred through the night. When dawn came, the dust rising on the horizon was not from 1 rider, but 3. Silas stepped onto the porch, shotgun slung across his back. Clara Mae stood beside him, her brother's old revolver in her grip, a weapon she hadn't touched in years. The riders slowed as they approached. One veered north, another south. But the third, the man in the black hat, kept straight on toward the Boone ranch. Silas Boone narrowed his eyes. Clara Mae's hand tightened on the pistol grip. The morning air was thick, expectant. as if even the land itself was holding its breath. The black horse stopped at the same post where the note had been left. The man dismounted slowly, boots hitting dirt with deliberate weight. He didn't look hurried, didn't look afraid. Virgil Crowe was here, and the quiet life of the Boone Ranch was about to change forever. Virgil Crowe stopped at the very post where he had left his message days before. This time he swung down from the saddle with the slow confidence of a man who had never been told no. Dust swirled around his boots as he planted himself in the packed dirt. Silas Boone stepped off the porch, shotgun slung across his shoulder. 10 paces of bare earth stretched between them, a distance that felt like the thin line between peace and blood. "Mornin', Boone," Virgil said with a smile that never reached his eyes. "You don't belong here," Silas answered, voice flat as stone. "I'm just here for the girl," Virgil said, tilting his head toward the house. "She's mine. She isn't yours," Silas replied. "Not now. Not ever." Virgil's grin widened. "You really think you can stop me?" "I don't think," Silas said, shifting his weight. "I act." The porch door opened, and from the shadows stepped Marshal Ezra Holt. His limp carried him down the steps one slow stride at a time, his lone eye fixed on the intruder. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone drew the air tight as a drum. Behind the curtain, Clara Mae Dawson pressed her hands against the fabric, her breath shallow. Every movement outside seemed to hang on a knife's edge. Virgil's grin faltered. For the first time, a crack appeared in his certainty. "Now hold on," he said, raising both hands a little. "I didn't come here for no blood. Just wanted a conversation." Ezra Holt kept walking, his long coat shifting in the breeze. A glimpse of 2 revolvers, worn and scarred from years of use, flashed at his hips. Not showy guns, not polished, just tools of a man who had already buried too many devils to be scared of one more. Virgil eased a step back toward his horse. "No need to stir things up, Marshal. I've got no quarrel with you." Still, Holt said nothing. Virgil turned his eyes back on Silas. "You're playing a dangerous game. Rancher, that woman you're protecting has cost men far more powerful than you a heap of trouble." "She's not trouble to me," Silas said. "She's the reason I get up in the morning," Virgil sneered. "So that's it. You think you can fix her, patch her together, and call yourself some kind of hero?" "No," Silas replied simply. "I just aim to be a man." Ezra Holt stopped at Silas's side. He didn't draw, didn't flinch. His voice, when it came, was dry as desert wind. "You're trespassing." The smirk drained from Virgil's mouth. He clicked his tongue, eyes narrowing. All right. I'll go for now. But don't mistake mercy for weakness." "You'd best go before I mistake it for permission," Holt said, his tone steady as iron. Virgil swung back onto his horse in one practiced motion. He didn't spit a final word, didn't curse. He simply turned the black horse and rode off. But the dust that trailed him wasn't retreat. It was a promise. Clara Mae stepped out onto the porch once the rider was gone, her arms trembling. "Thank you," she whispered to Holt. He gave a single nod, then turned to Silas. "I'll stay close in Red Willow a few days. If he shows again, wire me. You've got friends now. Appreciate it," Silas said quietly. By mid-morning the Boone Ranch looked still again, but Clara Mae knew silence didn't mean peace. She kept her hands busy mending curtains, lining up jars, baking bread no one asked for. Silas checked the fence lines again and again, his thoughts heavy as anchors. That night Clara Mae lay awake on her cot, staring at the rafters. The body waits until it feels safe, then lets loose its worst storms. She remembered the first time Virgil had struck her, the shock of it, the quick apology, the flowers that followed, promises broken as fast as they were made. At first he was careful, leaving no mark the neighbors could see, but cruelty always finds a way through. Bruises came eventually on ribs, arms, and places clothing could hide. She hadn't just run from the pain. She'd run from the woman she was becoming, the one who believed she somehow deserved it. A gentle knock came at the doorframe. Silas stood there in the glow of the fire. "You awake?" She nodded. "I can't stop thinking," he admitted. "Me neither." He came in, lowering himself onto a chair near the hearth. The flames painted his face in amber shadows. "You know, my wife used to do that too," he said. "Bake when she was nervous. House always smelled like cinnamon, even when neither of us could eat." Clara Mae smiled faintly. "She sounds kind." She was too kind. Maybe she'd left this world believing it was better than it is. What happened? Fever took her quick. One day she was laughing with the neighbor. Next day she was gone. "I'm sorry," Clara Mae whispered. He shrugged, not a careless shrug, but the kind a man carries when grief has long since welded itself into his bones. Years pass. Don't cut the same way, but it still echoes. Clara Mae drew her shawl closer. "Do you think someone like me deserves another chance?" "I think someone like you deserves peace," Silas said, his voice steady. She looked away, blinking hard. "That man, he doesn't let things go. Then we won't let you go either." Later that week, Silas rode into Red Willow for supplies, leaving Clara Mae with Jesse Pike and the other hands. By midday, she noticed they're quiet, too quiet. When she pressed them, they stumbled through excuses. Suspicion sent her following their trail beyond the fence line, toward the grove. There, nailed to a tree stump, was another letter. Her heart seized as she read the name written on it, her true name, Clara Esther Mallory, written in fine, deliberate ink. She tore it open, the words cut like a blade. 1 week. Come back quiet, or I drag you back loud. The rancher won't see another sunrise if you choose wrong. V. Clara Mae's pulse thundered. She crumpled the paper and spun on the boys. "Who brought this here?" The hands exchanged nervous glances. Jesse finally admitted, "Some man dropped it early this morning. Said it was for you." Clara Mae sprinted back to the house. She grabbed the shotgun Silas had taught her to use and planted herself by the window. Her eyes locked on the road until at last she saw his horse crest the hill. Silas Boone was riding home, and she was ready to tell him that Virgil Crowe had not finished with her, not by a long shot. Clara Mae Dawson met Silas Boone at the ranch gate, her hair loose and eyes wide with fear. The letter shook in her hand, as though it still burned. "They're going to kill you," she said, voice breaking. Silas took the folded paper, read it once, then again. His jaw tightened, but his words were cool as river stone. Then they best bring more than a pen next time. He tucked it in his coat like a man pocketing a debt he planned to collect. That night, Silas wired Marshal Ezra Holt. The reply came short and sharp. "Tell her to pack a bag. We're not just defending this land. We're taking the fight to him." By dawn, Clara Mae had gathered what little she could carry: 2 plain dresses, her worn Bible, and a small silver locket that once belonged to her mother. No trinkets, no frills, just the pieces of herself she could not leave behind. Silas met Holt at the eastern boundary as the sunrise painted the hills red and gold. The men exchanged no handshakes, no wasted words, only a nod, solemn and binding, as weighty as a blood oath. Where Holt asked, Silas pointed west. Crow's built himself a spread near Ash Hollow Creek. Put up new fences, stone house, big barn. Thought she'd crawl back to him. He won't expect her riding back with men who don't crawl, Holt said. Clara Mae's voice trembled, though her eyes did not. You think it'll work? No, Holt answered, flat and honest. But I know cowards only roar when they feel safe. Take that safety away, and they whimper. And so they rode. 3 shadows cut across the prairie: Silas Boone, Clara Mae Dawson, and Marshal Ezra Holt, silent and steady. The kind of company bound not by choice, but by fate. Clara Mae wore one of Silas's old dusters, sleeves dragging past her hands, hem whipping in the wind. Her hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat. From a distance, she looked more drifter than housekeeper. The coyotes sang to them at nightfall, and they slept in turns, each one listening for footsteps that never came. On the second night, as Silas fed the fire, Clara Mae spoke. Her voice was so soft it nearly blended with the wind. I used to dream of getting away, but even when I left, I didn't feel free. Not till now. Silas kept his eyes on the flames. Chains stay inside long after they're broken outside. She glanced toward Holt, who sat sharpening a knife, steel singing against stone. You ever been married, Marshal? He didn't answer right away. At last he said, once. Brief. What happened? Still working the blade, he said. She made me choose her, or the badge. I chose wrong. Silence stretched. Clara Mae watched the sparks rise into the dark sky. Do you regret it? Every day. Holt stood and walked into the trees, disappearing like smoke. By morning, Ash Hollow Creek lay before them. The land was fenced with coils of barbed wire, sharp as venom. A stone house rose on a ridge, chimney coughing dark smoke. Men prowled the grounds with rifles in hand, their eyes restless and hard. He's expecting trouble, Silas muttered. No, Holt corrected. He's expecting her to crawl back alone. They waited for nightfall. Holt vanished west, a shadow slipping into shadows. Silas and Clara Mae crept toward the barn, each step heavy as a confession. Then Clara Mae froze. A sound cut through the dark, a soft whimper. She pressed her ear to the wood. Through a knothole she saw her, a girl, maybe 8 years old, huddled beside a chained dog. Do you know her? Silas whispered. Clara Mae shook her head, tears brimming. No. But she's like I was. That was enough. The barn door groaned as Silas pushed it open. The girl shrank, shielding her face. Silas crouched low. Easy, sweetheart. You're safe now. She didn't believe him. Not until Clara Mae knelt beside her, fingers working the chain. I know what that feels like, she whispered. The child's eyes, too old for her years, lifted to meet hers. Slowly, she nodded. Silas snapped the chain loose. The dog pressed against Clara Mae's leg, silent as though he too understood rescue had come. Then a voice struck like thunder. Well, I'll be. Took you long enough? Virgil Crowe filled the doorway, rifle in one hand, torch in the other. Firelight carved his grin into something cruel. 2 armed men stepped in behind him. You came back. Clara Mae, just like I told you. I almost missed you. Clara Mae stepped in front of the girl. You don't get to miss me. Virgil's eyes shifted to Silas. And you just can't stop making poor decisions. Can you? Silas didn't flinch. Let the girl go. Virgil chuckled. You think you're the first fool to stand in my way? Courage buys nothing but a shallow grave. A sharp whistle cut the air, followed by a crack of gunfire. The torch in Virgil's hand burst into sparks. He staggered back with a howl. blood running from a graze on his shoulder. From the tree line. Marshal Holt stepped forward, rifle still smoking. His one eye gleamed cold. Next shot ain't a warning. Virgil's sneer twisted. You'll hang for this. I've got friends. Not anymore, Holt said. They all read the letters I sent. Judge, sheriff, preacher. They know about the girls you bought, the deeds you forged, the land you stole. You're a ghost now, and a man with no friends is already dead. Virgil's rage burned hotter. He raised his rifle, aiming at Clara Mae. Silas lunged, tackling him into the dirt. Fists flew. Dust rose. Silas fought not with frenzy, but with grim resolve. Every strike forged from nights he'd prayed for her safety. Peace wasn't passive. It had to be fought for. By the time Virgil stilled, his face was a ruin of blood and grit. He groaned once, then sagged. Clara Mae stood over him, chest heaving. You never owned me. The girl clung to her skirts. Silas rose, jaw clenched, hands raw. Marshal Holt knelt by Virgil, pressed 2 fingers to his throat, and gave a single nod. He'll live, for now, but for the first time, Clara Mae Dawson believed she might. The morning after the fight at Ash Hollow, the sun rose hard and bright, burning away the night smoke. Clara Mae Dawson knelt at the creek's edge, rinsing the dirt from Hannah Lee's small hands. The child blinked sleepily, hair tangled, cheeks smudged. Beside them, the dog thumped its tail against the ground, keeping a quiet vigil. Silas Boone worked not far away, stacking kindling and setting a fire for breakfast. His sleeves were rolled, arms marked with bruises from the scuffle with Virgil Crowe. But he moved steady, as if pain had no claim on him. Marshal Ezra Holt cinched the saddle on his horse. You two going to be all right? Holt asked. Silas looked up from the fire. We will now? Clara Mae met Holt's gaze, her eyes soft but full. Thank you. The marshal didn't smile. His nod was enough. Then, without ceremony, he swung into the saddle and rode out across the prairie. He left the way he'd come, silent as a shadow that knew its work was finished. That night, Hannah Lee curled between Silas and Clara Mae under a stack of patched quilts. The stars burned overhead, like lanterns hung in heaven. Silas whispered into the darkness. What's her name? Clara Mae smoothed the child's tangled hair. She told me once. Hannah Lee, that's a strong name, Silas said. So was mine, Clara Mae whispered. Her throat tightened, but I forgot it for a while. He turned toward her, his voice low. You remember it now? Her tears glimmered in the starlight. I do. It had been 3 years since anyone in Red Willow had seen Clara Mae Dawson. Some folks swore she'd thrown herself into the river. Others said she'd headed west, taken on a new name, and built a different life. The cruelest whispers claimed Virgil Crowe had buried her beneath his land like he'd always promised. So when Clara Mae walked into the Red Willow church house the following Sunday, with a little girl on her hip and a quiet rancher at her side, the congregation went still. Even Reverend Josiah Pike, who had endured war, drought, and men like Crowe, faltered mid-sermon and nearly dropped his Bible. Clara Mae's shoulders were squared, her chin lifted, but the shadow of fear lingered in her eyes. Fear never left all at once. It lingered like a nightmare that slipped into the corners of daylight. Silas Boone walked beside her, jaw clean-shaven, boots polished, hat clutched in his hands. Hannah Lee clung to Clara Mae's dress as if her small body had grown roots in the folds. The dog refused the door, sitting sentinel on the steps. They took a seat on the back bench. The last hymn faded, and people shuffled toward the aisle. Reverend Pike stepped down slowly, his eyes studying Silas before finding Clara Mae. "I buried you," he said softly. "No, sir," Clara Mae replied, steady as a stone. "You just stopped looking." A silence hung heavy. Then Reverend Pike nodded, extending his hand. "Welcome home." The town of Red Willow wasn't quick to forget, but whispers shifted like wind across grassland. Crowe's men had scattered after Ash Hollow. No charges had been filed, but tales moved fast, how a one-eyed lawman from the east had cut down a tyrant with a single shot, how Virgil Crowe, bloodied and humiliated, had slunk south with nothing but rage to keep him company, how Silas Boone, a widower few knew well, had stood against darkness when others turned away. Doors that once slammed shut at the sight of Clara Mae now cracked open. Women brought bread, men dropped off coats, invitations to supper appeared. Clara Mae accepted little, but she smiled when she could. She walked Hannah Lee to the schoolhouse, waiting on the steps until the girl disappeared through the doorway. The dog sat with her every morning, tail sweeping dust. Silas threw himself into work fixing fences, mending the roof, building a new swing for the porch. He showed Hannah Lee how to scatter grain for the chickens without frightening them, how to feed the horses with a flat palm. The girl laughed more now. She still startled at raised voices, still flinched if someone moved too fast. But the tightness in her small shoulders eased. She slept through the night. Late October winds brought the first bite of winter. That evening, Clara Mae asked Silas to sit by the fire. Words between them had been scarce since their return. Oh, sometimes silence healed more than talk ever could. She curled near the hearth, knees tucked, watching the flames. "I never thanked you," she said. "You don't have to." "I do," she whispered. "You didn't have to help me." Silas stared down at his hands. "I didn't help you, Clara Mae? I just did what any man ought to do." "Not many would have," she said. Her eyes held his. "Not many deserve to call themselves men." The silence stretched, but it was gentle this time. "I don't know how to live like this," she admitted. "Like what's safe?" Silas leaned forward, his voice steady. "You don't have to know how. You just have to try." "Upstairs," Hannah Lee muttered in her sleep. Clara Mae half rose, ready to go, but Silas touched her wrist lightly. "She's all right," he murmured. Clara Mae exhaled, settling back. "She calls me Mama," she said. "You are." She shook her head. "Not yet, not really. She had one once, but she's starting to forget. I see it in her eyes." Silas' voice was quiet. "She deserves someone who loves her. That's all. That's everything." Clara Mae's gaze lingered on him, full of words she wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. Snow came early to Red Willow that year. Frost clung to the fence rails, silvering the pasture. Clara Mae settled into a rhythm. Mornings filled with biscuits and eggs, afternoons spent mending clothes, evenings quiet with Silas's voice humming old hymns while he split wood. Hannah Lee played in the yard, bundled in a coat gifted by townsfolk. The dog shadowed her every step. For a moment, life looked almost like peace. But peace on the frontier was a fragile thing easy to break, hard to rebuild. And Clara Mae Dawson knew in her bones that Virgil Crowe's shadow had not vanished. It had only gone quiet, waiting for its hour to rise again. Peace in Red Willow never came cheap, and it never lasted long. It lived on borrowed time. Clara Mae Dawson was rolling out dough for a pie when a hard knock rattled the door. Not timid, not neighborly. A measured strike of knuckles, steady as a claim. Her hands froze in flour. The rolling pin slipped from her grip. Silas Boone strode to the door, pulling it open. 3 men stood on the porch. Not townsfolk, not ranch hands, strangers with the smell of dust and cruelty clinging to their coats. "We're looking for Virgil Crowe," the tallest said. His voice carried the edge of command. A scar cut from ear to jaw, puckered and white, and his eyes didn't bother pretending to smile. "Ain't no Virgil here," Silas said. The man took a step closer. "He owes us. Sold us a girl. 9 years old. Said she'd be his till spring. She weren't there when we came calling. But his blood's on your barn floor." Silas didn't blink. "That your business?" The scarred man's lips stretched into a slow grin. "It is now." Clara Mae appeared behind Silas, pale but steady. She saw the man's gaze flick past Silas, searching the room. Hungry. His grin widened. "Well now, there she is." He didn't finish. The shotgun barrel rose, pressed firm against his chest. Clara Mae's hands didn't tremble. Silas didn't move to stop her. "She's ours," the man said. "She's mine," Clara Mae answered. He chuckled low. "You think that dog's going to keep you safe? That girl don't even exist on paper." "I don't need paper," Clara Mae said. Her voice was steel. "I've got fire." The dog growled deep. "Hackles up." Another step and the man might have tested her resolve, but a second knock boomed from the back door. Silas turned, muscles tight. A 4th man stood there, then a 5th. They weren't just asking. They were hunting. The next few minutes blurred into chaos. Silas grabbed the rifle from the wall. Clara Mae bolted upstairs, snatched Hannah Lee, and clutched her close. The dog launched from the porch, teeth sinking into the leg of the scarred man. Gunfire cracked, wood splintered, shouts cut the air. Silas fired from the doorway, fell back as glass shattered around him. Clara Mae ran for the cellar. Hannah Lee pressed against her chest, the girl's sobs muffled in her skirts. They didn't flee. They made a stand. By the time help arrived, neighbors alerted by smoke signals, 2 of the strangers lay dead in the dirt. The rest scattered into the timber, their boots pounding retreat. Clara Mae staggered out of the cellar, dress torn, face streaked with dust. Silas leaned against the porch beam, his shoulder bleeding, but his eyes blazed with something fiercer than pain. Hannah Lee clung to Clara Mae's neck, fingers locked tight enough to bruise. Sheriff Amos Whitlock holstered his weapon, surveying the wreckage. "You all right, no?" Silas answered. Then he straightened, wiping blood from his brow. "But we will be." The next day, Reverend Josiah Pike came by, hat in hand. He offered prayer and plans, words to soothe and hands to help. Townsfolk followed with blankets, food, tools for repairs. Red Willow had seen enough of Virgil Crowe's cruelty to know where their sympathies belonged now. Clara Mae stood taller. For the first time in years, she carried herself not just with defiance, but with something sturdier belonging. When winter deepened and the church bells rang out, Christmas morning, Silas Boone walked Clara Mae Dawson and Hannah Lee down the aisle, not as a savior, not as a shield, but as a man who had found faith in life again. Clara Mae said yes, not from fear, not from need, but because she'd finally come to believe that love didn't have to hurt. Oh, spring came sudden and bold, washing away the frost and the grief winter had left behind. Green burst from the soil as if the earth itself had decided to begin again. Calves wobbled in the fields. Fences were mended, and in Red Willow folks spoke of new beginnings as if they were owed after such a harsh season. But none carried the weight of rebirth like Clara Mae Boone. The name sat strange on her tongue at first. She'd taken it quietly in the chapel. No frills, no flowers, just her, Silas, Hannah Lee, and Reverend Pike. The dog waited on the steps like a solemn witness. No lace, no music, only vows spoken by two people who understood pain better than poetry. Clara Mae never thought she'd be a wife again. Never thought she'd be called Mama by a child who clung to her skirts. Yet here she was, morning scented, with coffee and wood smoke, Silas's steady presence at her back, Hannah Lee's laughter spilling down the stairs. Still, not every wound healed neat. Sometimes Clara Mae froze mid-task, eyes gone distant, hands still in the dough or linen, memories pressed heavy on her chest. Silas would step close then, saying nothing, offering only his presence, a reminder she was not alone in the remembering. Hannah Lee bore scars too. She startled at raised voices, eyed doorways with suspicion. But she had begun to draw again chickens, trees, a house with 3 stick figures holding hands. Clara Mae wept when she found that one. Silas framed it and hung it above the hearth. For a while, it felt like peace. But peace, in Red Willow, never lasted. It was Silas who noticed him first. A man by the church fence one Sunday after service. A stranger, not passing through, but watching. He tipped his hat when Silas caught his eye, then slipped around the building and was gone. Something about his stride sat wrong in Silas's chest. He said nothing to Clara Mae, not yet, not until he knew for certain. That night he checked the locks twice, sat up longer than usual, boots still on, rifle resting by his chair. The dog, old but loyal, paced the doorway, growled low, then laid down uneasy. Morning came, and Clara Mae found tracks in the garden, too large for Hannah Lee, too wide for her own. She called Silas without a word, only pointed. He studied the prints, then gave one curt nod. They were watching. She whispered. He didn't deny it. Hannah Lee chased butterflies across the yard, laughter sweet as bells. Clara Mae's heart clenched at the sound, joy tangled with fear. That afternoon, Silas saddled his horse and rode into Red Willow. He told Clara Mae he was fetching seed. In truth, he went to see Sheriff Amos Whitlock. The sheriff listened, jaw tight, nodding slow. "Crow's gone," he said. "But evil like his don't die with the man. You be careful. Boone, the prairie's long, and it remembers." Silas tipped his hat, but the weight in his chest told him the sheriff was right. Peace in Red Willow lived on borrowed time. The description was plain enough to curdle Silas Boone's blood. Clean boots, tall frame, white hair that didn't match his years. Sheriff Amos Whitlock rubbed his jaw as he listened. "You think he's tied to those men who came after the girl?" the sheriff asked. "Could be," Silas said. "Or worse." Whitlock straightened, the boards of his porch groaning beneath his boots. "I'll send a couple of my boys to circle your property after dark. Quiet. No talk of it in town." Silas tipped his hat. "Appreciate it." Back at the Boone Ranch, Clara Mae tried to carry on as though nothing had shifted. She hung linens on the line with calm hands, even as her eyes swept the horizon too often. She stirred stew with one hand, the other never far from the shotgun. At night she read from the Bible to Hannah Lee, her voice steady, but her ears straining for every creak in the floorboards. 3 days passed without sign. On the 4th morning, the dog was gone. He never strayed far, never missed a meal. But that day his bowl was full, the porch empty. Silas searched the pastures, the creek beds, the grove of cottonwoods. Nothing. The silence of his absence was so loud it rattled the bones of the house. That night they heard it, a soft chime, metal on metal, the pulley at the well. Silas snatched his rifle. Clara Mae followed, despite his raised hand telling her to stay. Together they crept through the moonlight toward the well. There, tied to the post, was the dog, alive, trembling, muzzle bound with a rag. His eyes rolled wild, but he wasn't harmed. From the pulley rope, dangling just above the black mouth of the well, a note fluttered. Clara Mae tore it free, her hands shaking. "She's not yours." Her lips trembled. Silas pulled her close, eyes narrowed. That night he moved Hannah Lee into their bedroom, laying a cot nearby. The girl didn't question it, as though some old instinct told her the world had shifted again. Clara Mae held her close, breathing in her hair like a promise. Sheriff Whitlock doubled the watch. Still, no one spotted the white-haired man again, but the fear seeped into every board of the Boone ranch. Then came the letter. No postmark, no name, just a scrap of paper shoved beneath the door at dawn. Clara Mae bent to pick it up. You think you've saved her, but she remembers. And soon, so will you. Her breath broke. The paper fell from her fingers. Silas read it twice, then fed it into the stove fire. Not worth keeping, he muttered, though his eyes stayed hard on the flames. That night Clara Mae sat by the hearth, fingers twisted in her lap. Silas joined her, silent. The fire popped. Shadows climbed the walls. She remembers something, Clara Mae whispered. She's safe here, Silas said. She's not safe anywhere if this doesn't stop. He looked at her. You want to run? No. Her voice steadied. I want to fight. Upstairs, Hannah Lee cried out in her sleep. Clara Mae rushed to her, arms ready. She found the girl sitting up, eyes glassy. Mama, she whispered. He came to me again, in my dream. Clara Mae smoothed her hair, heart racing. Who? Sweetheart. The man with the belt. The one with the white hair. He used to lock me in the dark. Clara Mae froze, blood draining from her face. He says he's coming back. Before the sun had climbed high, Silas was already in Red Willow, speaking low with Sheriff Whitlock outside the jailhouse. Clara Mae waited near the general store, Hannah Lee clinging to her hip, her small hands gripping so tight they left prints. She described him, Silas said, voice rough from a sleepless night. White hair, belt he used to strike her, locked her in dark rooms. And now the notes, the dog, the well. He's haunting her again. The sheriff leaned on the rail, jaw working. This ain't coincidence. No, sir. Not anymore. I need to know if anyone's passed through. Silas pressed. Someone who'd fit. Someone who'd have reason to haunt a child like this. Whitlock thought a moment, then nodded slowly. Couple days back, one fella came in from the west. Didn't stay long. Paid cash, kept to himself. Coat clean, boots shined. White hair, didn't seem old enough for it, but white as snow. Where'd he go? Mounted up and rode south. But he could have circled back. Never gave his name. Silas cursed under his breath. Nah. That afternoon, back at the ranch, they reinforced every door and window. Boards hammered across glass. Locks tested and retested. Rifles and pistols placed where hands could find them fast. They pulled the mattress into the center of the room so Hannah Lee wouldn't sleep near a window. The dog, since found, refused to leave her side, laying watchful at her feet. Clara Mae didn't send him away. She felt safer with his growl guarding the silence. That evening, as dusk bled into night, a sound cut through the quiet. A whistle. One long note, high and steady, the kind men used to call a dog. Silas rose fast, rifle already in hand. Clara Mae grabbed Hannah Lee, pulling her down behind the overturned table they'd turned into a barricade. Then came the voice. Smooth. Familiar. Poison wrapped in honey. I've come for what's mine. Clara Mae's face drained of color. Her arms locked tighter around Hannah Lee. Silas stepped toward the door, his voice steel. You got one chance to turn around. Hands in the air. Walk away, or I'll bury you here. Silence. Then laughter. Soft. Low. Chilling. You've been feeding her lies, the voice said. But she remembers me now. Don't you, little bird Hannah? Lee whimpered against Clara Mae's coat. That's his voice. He's the one she broke off. Shaking. The dog snarled. Every muscle coiled. I'll count to 3, Silas warned. If I see a shadow move, if I hear one more sound, it's over. 1. A rustle on the porch. 2. The clink of metal. A spur. A weapon. 3. The rifle cracked. Silas Boone did not hesitate. The first shot shattered the night. Silas Boone fired sharp and true toward the porch, then dropped low as a bullet splintered the frame above his head. The white-haired devil wasn't alone. 2 more men slipped from the shadows, rifles raised. But Silas had defended his land before, and he knew a man doesn't get second chances if he flinches. Gunfire cracked against the quiet plains, echoing like thunder over empty fields. The dog lunged with a snarl, throwing one man off balance as he reached for the door. Clara Mae Dawson didn't scream. She wrapped her arms tighter around Hannah Lee, shielding her with her body. Her lips moved in a whisper, desperate and fierce. Lord, not this time. Please, not this time. On the porch. Silas's rifle barked again. One attacker spun and fell, clutching his thigh, weapon skittering into the dirt. He howled and crawled into the darkness, vanishing with blood in his trail. Another fled outright, swallowed by the trees, leaving only their leader to face the rancher. The white-haired man stepped forward, calm, grinning. He carried no rifle, only the weight of his voice. You don't know what she is, he said. But I do. I made her, broke her in like a colt. She's mine. My blood runs in her veins. Silas leveled the barrel steady. You're nothing but a nightmare she outgrew. The man's grin widened. Shoot me and you'll never learn the truth. You'll never know why she weeps when it storms, why she hides when a hand is raised. You'll never know what she did. The crack of Silas's rifle cut him short. He crumpled to the ground, shoulder torn, breath ragged, alive, but pinned. Silas approached, rifle still hot. I'll let the law deal with you, he said, voice low. If it were up to me, he didn't finish. The choice burned in his throat. Sheriff Amos Whitlock arrived minutes later with 2 deputies. They dragged the wounded man, his white hair matted with blood, into the sheriff's wagon. Another attacker was caught crossing Ash Hollow Creek, limping and cursing. The rest had scattered. You did right, Whitlock told Silas. You kept your family safe. But Silas didn't feel like any kind of hero. He only felt worn, as if the fight had carved 10 more years into his bones. Clara Mae stood near the wagon. Hannah Lee pressed to her side. The girl's eyes were wide, her voice small. She hadn't spoken since the gunfire. When night finally came, She clung to Clara Mae's dress and whispered, "Mama, what is it? Child? He said something." Hannah Lee breathed. "Before the shooting, he said he left something behind, that he wasn't finished." Clara Mae kissed her hair, but the chill in her chest told her the fight wasn't over. At dawn, Hannah Lee woke with new words. She sat up in bed, eyes far away, I remember, she whispered. Clara Mae rushed to her side. "What do you remember, sweetheart?" "He wasn't my father," the girl said. "He told me he would, but he lied. I had a mama before him. She had brown hair like yours. She sang to me at night." Clara Mae's arms wrapped her tight, tears burning her eyes. "Maybe she's still out there," Hannah Lee said. Clara Mae kissed her forehead. "She's here now, in your heart." The weeks that followed moved with the hush of healing. Not ordinary days, but a fragile kind of quiet where every meal shared, every hand held felt like a stitch binding them back together. Hannah Lee never spoke of the white-haired man again. Not in name, not in dreams. Clara Mae didn't press. Some truths came free in their own time. Others stayed buried beneath patience and prayer. But light returned to the girl's voice, a lift in her laugh, a softness in her step. She hugged the dog with a joy that said he was more than a guard. He was family. Clara Mae had become her home. And Silas Boone, he was her mountain, steady and immovable, the strong place the world had denied her before. Autumn brought quiet days. Corn husks dried in the wind. Smoke rose from neighbors' chimneys. And for the first time in months there were no letters, no whistles in the dark, just the sound of harvest and the promise of winter. Clara Mae worked in the kitchen again. Hannah Lee beside her. The girl fetched eggs, snapped beans, measured flour with careful pride. She hummed sometimes soft, fractured songs stitched from lullabies her real mother once sang. She didn't call Clara Mae Mama again right away, but her eyes, full of trust, said more than the word ever could. Then came the letter. Sheriff Whitlock brought it himself, tucked among the town's ordinary mail. He hadn't recognized the seal, but his face was gray when he wrote up the Boone place. "You'd best read this inside," he said. Silas opened it, scanning once, then twice. Clara Mae read over his shoulder, her hand tightening on his arm. The letter wasn't from a stranger. It belonged to the white-haired devil himself, the man they thought bound for trial. But he'd never made it there. A guard from the border jail had written, "The prisoner had died on the road. Fever or infection, the truth unclear. But before his body was hauled away, they found this letter tucked in his boot, addressed in a jagged hand, to whoever finds her." Inside was the truth no one had braced for. Hannah Lee hadn't just been stolen. She'd been sold. Traded in the dark by a man who called himself her uncle, handed over after her mother's death to the white-haired stranger when she was just 5 years old. The letter didn't explain why. It only hinted there were others, other children, other sales, other lives buried in silence. Clara Mae's hands clenched the paper until it nearly tore. Her breath came sharp, her heart aching for the girl asleep in the next room. This wasn't just about one man anymore. It was bigger, darker, and it wasn't finished. "There might be others," Clara Mae Dawson whispered, clutching the letter until her knuckles went white. Silas Boone nodded grimly. "And someone still out there who remembers her." Sheriff Amos Whitlock lowered his hat brim. "I'll do some digging. Old missing persons, family records, anything that might tie her back to a name that's rightfully hers." That night, Clara Mae didn't sleep. She sat by the fire. Hannah Lee pressed against her chest. She stared into the flames, and wondered who this little girl had been before shadows swallowed her. What name had been spoken to her at birth? Who had sung her to sleep? Who might she grow to be now by morning? Silas found Clara Mae at the edge of the pasture, her dress hem tugged by the wind, eyes on the horizon. She deserves a name. Clara Mae said, "She has one." No. Her voice cracked but stayed steady. A full one. Not just a borrowed name stitched to someone else's nightmare. One that tells her she belongs to us now. Silas stepped beside her, the prairie wind tugging at his collar. "I've been thinking on that, too." He reached into his coat and pulled out something worn from time, a ribbon. Blue, frayed at the corner. She had this tied in her dress the day she showed up. He said, "Didn't think much of it then." He handed it to Clara Mae. Tiny letters embroidered in careful thread shone faint against the faded cloth. E.M.A. Initials. Clara Mae asked, "Maybe? But it's a start." They brought it inside. Let Hannah Lee turn it over in her small hands. The girl traced the letters again and again. Then she whispered, voice fragile but sure, "My name was May. Before, that's what she called me." "Your mama Clara?" Mae asked. The child nodded. "She said I was born in spring," said Mae Rose, "because she prayed I'd grow gentle and strong." Clara Mae pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling hot and fast. From that day forward, Hannah Lee became Mae Rose Harper once more. Not a shadow, not just a child they sheltered, but a daughter named, claimed, and loved. The seasons turned. The Boone Ranch shifted too. It was no longer only a refuge from the storms of the past. It became a home planted in love deeper than blood. A year passed, and Mae Rose grew tall. She buried herself in books, soaking up stories like thirsty roots drink rain. She loved horses, too, with a reverence that amazed Silas Boone. He taught her to ride, slow and steady, while Clara Mae showed her how to knead bread and season stew. Together they taught her the truth that not every shadow ends in fear. The third spring brought change again. A knock at the door, soft, cautious, not the kind that carried threats. Clara Mae opened it with Silas at her side. A thin woman stood on the porch, a newspaper clipping clutched in her hands. Her voice shook when she spoke. "My name is Martha Lynn Cooper. I've been looking for my niece. She vanished when she was 5. From the kitchen, Mae Rose peeked around the doorway. The paper slipped from the woman's hand. She fell to her knees. Mae the girl froze. Then, step by step, she moved closer. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Clara Mae knew it was truth. The kind that didn't break a life, but healed it. Martha Lynn Cooper stayed for a week, long enough to tell them of her sister, Eleanor Rose Harper, Mae's real mother, who died of fever. Long enough to tell of the man who'd taken the child under the guise of care, only to trade her away in darkness. Long enough to see with her own eyes that Mae was safe now and cherished. When she left, she did so with peace in her heart. Mae stayed where she belonged, not because Clara Mae and Silas had claimed her, but because love had. Family, they realized, wasn't always born. Sometimes it was forged in fire. Sometimes it arrived on a broken horse in the night. Sometimes it whispered mama before it even knew your name. Spring returned to Red Willow with a gentleness none of them had expected. Golden light washed the fields. Wildflowers climbed along the fence lines. Birds nested again under the chapel eaves. Time had passed like a quilt stitched around them, soft, warm, unnoticed until it covered their shoulders fully. The sharp edges of grief dulled into memory, not erased, but transformed into markers of grace. reminders of how far they'd come. May Rose Harper turned 10 that spring. Clara Mae stood at the garden bed, apron dusted with flour, pie dish balanced in one hand. She watched May chase a runaway chicken across the yard, a book tucked stubbornly under her arm. The hen darted into the tall grass. May plopped down, opened the book, and began reading aloud to herself, her lips forming every word with reverence. "You've read that one 5 times this week." Clara Mae called, smiling. May didn't look up. "It gets better each time." Silas came around the corner, a saddle over one shoulder, a hammer in the other. He was supposed to be fixing the eastern gate, though Clara Mae suspected he just liked keeping his hands busy. He tipped his hat toward his daughter, then toward his wife. "Is she wrangling chickens, or words today, both?" Clara Mae said with a laugh. "Then I put my wager on the chicken." The porch gleamed with fresh paint now. New railings. Curtains stitched by Clara Mae's own hands framed May's window. Inside, the walls bore her drawings wild. Childish sketches filled with animals, sunflowers, and skies too big for paper. One picture showed a gray-bearded man holding a little girl's hand. Another, a woman balancing a pie and a shepherd dog. The last one had 3 figures seated at a table, smiling, hearts drawn above their heads. A family, not bound by law, not sealed by blood, bound instead by survival, by fire, by love. Nights grew quieter in the Boone household. May no longer woke in terror, no longer hid her cries under blankets. The memories hadn't disappeared, but they had softened, reshaped into something she could carry. Not a chain, not anymore, just a scar. And scars could live without ruling a life. One afternoon, Clara Mae Dawson folded laundry by the fire. May sat close beside her, her small hands brushing a sheet smooth across her lap. "Did God send me to you?" she asked softly. "Or did he send you to me?" Clara Mae looked up, her hands pausing mid-fold. "Maybe both," she whispered. "Maybe we were each other's answer." May nodded, satisfied, and kept helping. In Red Willow, the story of the girl had spread far and wide. Folks spoke of Sheriff Amos Whitlock's ride through the night, of the burned-out barn where it all began, of names half lost to darkness and men who vanished like smoke. But over time, gossip gave way to something gentler. Now, May was the girl who rode faster than most boys, who devoured 3 books in a week, who baked apples for Reverend Josiah Pike's ailing wife. She became the town's quiet miracle, a living light that softened even the hardest hearts. Then, one day, another letter came. It arrived wrapped in brown paper. No return mark, just one word written across the front in looping script May. Clara Mae opened it with trembling hands, Silas Boone steady at her side. Inside was no threat, no curse, only a photograph, faded with time, but clear enough. A woman with chestnut hair, holding a baby in a field of wildflowers. Beneath it, a name written in cursive, Eleanor Rose Harper. May's mother. There was no message, no sender. But Clara Mae felt it in her bones. Someone had pieced together part of the story and sent it not to wound, but to mend. May held the photo to her chest, her eyes brimming but steady. For the first time, she knew the face that had once sung her lullabies, the arms that had once held her. The wind whispered through the fields beyond the Boone ranch, soft and steady. And in that moment, they all understood. What had been broken was not erased. It had been made whole again. The past had carved its scars, but love had filled each one with gold. Not the kind that fades, not the kind that leaves, the kind that stays. Life has a way of leaving scars, both seen and unseen. For Clara Mae, those scars came as bruises and memories she tried to bury. For Silas Boone, they came in the silence of grief, after losing his wife and unborn child. Yet, when their paths crossed, they discovered something many of us forget in our later years. Healing often begins not in solitude, but in the presence of someone who chooses to stay. This story reminds us that strength isn't about fists or rifles. It's about standing beside someone when the world looks away. It tells us that family isn't always bound by blood, but by love that shows up, day after day, even when it's hard. For those of us who have lived long enough to know both joy and sorrow, the lesson is simple but profound. No matter our age, no matter our past, love can still find us, remake us, and give us a home. And when we choose compassion over fear, we become the answer to someone else's prayer. Thank you, dear friends, for spending your time with us and letting these frontier stories stir your hearts. If this tale touched you, please like, share, and subscribe so more souls can journey with us across the wide, wild West. Your support keeps these stories alive.